Okay, everybody, and welcome back to the Gulf Coast Growth Show. I'm your host, Jason Lee. My co-host, Zeke Smith, couldn't make it down here today because we kind of had an emergency episode that we're going to try to get out to you due to the significant nature of our port essentially getting shut down based on the strike, right, which is a significant concern here in the region and obviously a huge impact for the economy. And we are joined by Miss Margaret Kitt from the University of Houston. She's the program director and a professor for supply chain and logistics.
Yes,
Did I get
Jason.
that?
Yeah, you did,
I nailed
Jason.
it? Okay, great. Now, I think you've been on a tour in the last few days. I think we're probably, I don't know, the 50th interview that you've probably had to do.
Some 50, 60.
Okay, 50 or 60. So now, again, clearly you are well versed in this, a consummate professional. We've had you on the show before, so we do want to thank you for your prompt response and getting over to this side of town ASAP so we can get some great information to you and get it out to our members, to our stakeholders, to the individuals that we know that this is going to have a huge impact on. And so we want to thank you for that. With that being said, why don't you kind of get us up to speed on exactly what's going on for those that aren't, I mean, we know what a strike means, we know what it means to the port, but maybe people don't understand how what's happening exactly.
Well, Jason, that's a great place to start. We're in day 3 of this strike, and it's not just Houston. We are looking at ports from Brownsville all the way up to Maine that are closed, the container operations. And so the last time we found ourselves at this point in time was in 1977. Do you know what trade was as a percentage of GDP in 1977?
I'm going to guess it was a lot less than what it is today.
Well, that's true. Globalization has certainly grown exponentially over the last 50 years. Now, trade was 16% of U.S. GDP in 1977. Flash forward today, it is 28%. So closing our ports, which are economic engines for both local communities, the state, and the nation, it has tremendous impact on the country overall, and there's really ramifications globally.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, we're such an import-export, especially here in this particular region when you think about the refineries and the plants and the things that are coming in and out of there. So you mentioned container. So I had heard, and maybe there's not any truth to this, are there a number of different folks working on the ports getting things in and out? So the workers that are on strike right now, when people think about all the work that goes into the port, who exactly is it that's on strike?
Okay, so it's the International Association of Longshoremen, also known as the ILA, and there are approximately 45,000 members along the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coast that are on strike. Now, while this impacts our container facilities such as Barber's Cut and Bayport, it doesn't impact the bulk liquids or bulk shipments that come through our port. So the good news for our region is that we're not overly dependent on containers. We're number 5 port in containers nationally, but the flow of petrochemicals has continued.
Oh, so that's not been a problem as far as the flow of petrochemicals.
Right, because those are private terminals. They're not managed by ILA.
Fantastic. So that's an important note for this particular region. So walk me back through how we got here. So how did this end up getting to this type of situation?
So, Jason, there's a master contract that the U.S. Maritime Alliance represents the shippers, the carriers, port associations, terminal operators, and there's the ILA. And this contract expires every 6 years, and they've been in negotiations for a good period of time. We knew in the spring there were some headwinds, and in June they just stopped negotiating.
Just stopped negotiating.
The
3 months ago.
Yeah, conversation ended. Both parties kind of dug in their heels, and so flash forward, here we are, and day 3, and 36 ports closed down in terms of container movements. I think what the public isn't so aware of is that everything we purchase comes in a container, like that jacket you have on.
Right. Extremely concerning when you think about what we've already been dealing with when it comes to inflation in the last couple of years. I think we're just now started to see inflation kind of ease up. The Fed just lowered rates and I think people were very optimistic that we were going to kind of continue to see that heading into next year. Now, walk me through the potential impact that this could have on inflation, considering the fact that most of the stuff that we're buying is coming in through containers.
Right. So, I mean, if this is short-lived, there'll probably be no impact at all.
Okay.
If this becomes an extended, prolonged strike, we will experience inflation just as we did during COVID. And, we experienced high inflation. It was a matter of supply-demand, not any policy issues. It was supply-demand. And so we will experience temporary period of inflation. Now, I'm hoping this gets resolved sooner versus later. I think the economic impact is so substantive. It's been estimated to be between $4 and $5 billion a day nationally. That's 4 to 5 billion.
That's crazy.
It's big money, and we're just now recovering from COVID, as you said, and so I think it's in everyone's best interest to get to the table, both labor and the U.S. Maritime Alliance, and meet in the middle, get a deal done.
So, in your opinion, and again, we're not going to fact check you or anything, so we don't know what the accurate answer here is. But what would be the you said short period of time or a long period of time? So, if this was a short period of time, it probably doesn't have a huge impact. In your opinion, what is a short period? A week, 2 weeks?
I would consider a short period a week to a week and a half. When we start crossing over that 2-week mark and get into a 3-week, there's some impact. 5 billion a day times 10 days, and then it takes 5 to 7 days for every day of the strike to play catch up. But when over half the country is going to be opening back up once this is settled, our transportation infrastructure has limitations. So that trade has to be worked through the system. It could be early 2025 for all that cargo to get moved and settled to the ultimate destination.
Absolutely. We faced that before, if I'm not mistaken, because once the economy opened back up, you have this backlog or this surge of stuff that has to come, but there's only so many truckers, there's only so many routes. I know across the East Coast with Helene that just happened, all of those states, Carolina, all throughout the East Coast, we've got lots of logistics and probably supply chain problems. Even though there weren't necessarily any ports that were taken out, I know the trucking industry, everything is kind of a compounding effect. So if, I guess if it lasts beyond 2 weeks, now you were saying before the show, if it's not like the industry was completely taken off guard by this because they've had several months to kind of plan for it. So were organizations, major companies, were people planning in a sense? Were they prepping, perhaps buying more goods or doing things in advance to have a little backstock per se to avoid any disruption in case this took a couple of weeks to get resolved? I mean, or were people completely taken off guard?
No, you're exactly right. Our big box stores planned, lessons learned in COVID, they planned ahead of time. So you started seeing cargo coming in May, June, and July for peak season, and which would normally come August, September, October. So I would estimate 70 to 80% of goods that were destined for peak season here in the U.S., came late spring, early summer. But that doesn't take into account the small and mid-sized retailers and businesses that didn't have the capital or the lines of credit to hold inventory over that long period of time. And, small and mid-sized businesses are the backbone of the U.S. economy. So I'm concerned. I'm also concerned that this Friday, truckers across the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic will not have a paycheck. Many of them that run drayage operations.
Oh my Lord. Okay.
How would you feed your family?
Right.
Miss a paycheck for a week, miss it for 2 weeks. Would you consider maybe taking another opportunity, another job?
Right. Yeah, I think the compounding effect could get pretty significant, especially, and we forget this in our day. We're like, oh, well, did you read that, man? There was a strike at the port. No one's really thinking how does this impact me? So what does that look like as a consumer? So if I fast forward and this thing starts to edge out over 2 weeks, and we're a month into this thing, and I'm just working in my office building downtown trying to figure out, how does this hurt me? How does that hurt me? How does it start to impact me as an average Joe?
Well, on the short term, we don't anticipate an impact. I remain a little concerned that we've started seeing evidence of consumers hoarding, and we want to discourage that. There's no reason to panic. On the short run, I think your average consumer will not experience any pain or any short supplies. But we move into 2 to 3 weeks away from here. You might see an impact on perishable goods like the fresh fruits and vegetables we bring from Central and South America.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and then again, I'm just thinking of Helene and the impact there. We're already seeing, especially nationwide, people having stepped up to support that particular region with perishable goods or not non-perishable items,
Right.
things that they're trying to do. So it's, I think it can make a situation like that more compounded as far as negativity, because if I'm thinking I might not be able to have access to this, I perhaps don't want to give up toilet paper and send it to North Carolina where they may be needed, or they need bottled water, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we all know how we act in the toilet paper aisles.
Right.
If we have a major, it's like there's a hurricane, everyone floods the toilet paper.
Toilet paper and water.
Astros lose the playoffs. Everybody went and flooded for toilet paper yesterday. So
Right.
I thought that's what it was about, but I guess now you're saying it's because of this.
Well,
So
the
it
good
makes
news,
sense.
toilet paper is made in the U.S., so that doesn't go on a ship.
All right.
But where we could see some pain is if this becomes extended, all those holiday spirits we order, like champagne and whiskey and gourmet meats and cheeses from Europe, there could be a shortage, there could be some serious inflationary pressure. I don't have a crystal ball, but I have to think the potential impact is so substantive that if the two parties can't agree, the Biden administration, with the election 32 days away, would probably get involved. If we get to the end of week 2 and there's no agreement, I could see the pressure mounting. As it stands, the National Retail Federation, hundreds of trade groups have sent letters to the White House imploring a settlement.
Okay. And then just so for our listeners, what does the presidential or the White House's involvement look like in a situation like this?
Okay, so it's called the Taft-Hartley Act, and it gives the president the room to resolve a strike and create an 80-day cooling off period for both parties to negotiate a compromise. The problem here with the Biden administration doing this is that first he's vowed to not do it. He has had a very positive relationship with labor. It could potentially cost the potential Harris administration a win in November. So it's a really delicate dance right now between the economy, keeping labor happy, and the election.
Right. Now, I would imagine that's fairly weighted, especially during a season like this. It's compounded in multitudes. That's one thing to point out. What happens to these? Because really, I guess these employees or the laborers, really, they have the power in this particular position. So if they do go back to work, do they just smiley faces, 80 days? I mean, because I have a hard time imagining myself being like, okay, well, the president said we got to go back, so hi ho, it's off to work we go. I would imagine there's still a little push-pull there going on.
Well, I don't see them going back with happy faces. If the Taft-Hartley Act is used, I would speculate that they would slow their efforts in moving cargo, and
so it's still an impact.
Yeah, there would still be an impact.
Okay. So let's talk about this next steps and what that looks like. Number one, what do we do from here, and what does this look like in the next 30 days if everything goes according to plan, or let's say they don't get this resolved? And other than the president stepping in Is there anything else that can be done, or is there anything else? We backed up. I'm sorry about that. With the containers coming in and us having access to the other components of the port, does it mean anything to this particular region, oil and gas wise, the refineries, the plants? I mean, I think that's a relevant topic. I mean, is there any risk of a compounding effect of jobs being impacted here outside of those that are impacted by the port?
No, absolutely. So
And the truckers, I'm sorry, the truckers. I don't want to
So, yeah, so raw materials and component parts for manufacturing processes will potentially force some processes to either slow down or close down, and that can cost millions of dollars to close down a manufacturing process. I'm a little concerned about the resin market and the ability, what the ability is for storage. And then I guess the other thing is I keep thinking about these truck drivers, the drayage drivers who are picking up the containers at the port, taking them to warehouses, distribution centers, manufacturing. They're not getting a paycheck this Friday.
Right. Yeah. Well, first of all, that speaks to a lot to your character, because we're sitting here talking about the economy and you're worried about these truck drivers and they're not getting a paycheck. So thank you for that.
Well, these are people in our community.
Absolutely.
And they're part of the ecosystem.
And they're a huge part of the ecosystem, and we appreciate that. One of the things that I'm most proud of about the region in and of itself is how much we honor and take pride in those that are in the workforce, that are out there, driving trucks and turning wrenches and working behind the gates. And so you're absolutely right. They're essential. They're people that are critical to the success of this region, and you're right. We need to make sure they're getting paid. So as we kind of gear up to wrap up, I guess what I'd like to, is there anything that you'd like to leave as kind of a last statement as to, for those that are listening, optimistic, pessimistic, either way, give us kind of again, not going to be held accountable to this, but your overall forecast of what we could come to expect from this situation.
Well, we're very blessed. This region has had a very collaborative relationship with labor. We have a can-do attitude here in Houston. These longshoremen put America's families ahead of their own. They worked during COVID in very adverse conditions. I understand them wanting an equitable wage adjustment, and that should happen.
Right.
I think, next steps, I think the public could send letters to their elected officials or emails in Washington to encourage that this, pressure be put on to get this resolved, because it's in none of our benefits for this to be extended.
Fantastic, and I think that was a great ad, because oftentimes we're like, well, I guess I'm helpless, but you're really not. And one of the things that we highly encourage in this show and the Economic Alliance really tries to bring value to in the region is that we are all in this together. And your legislators, they're not in a position where they just sit in some office somewhere and don't. They are there for the people. They are there to behave and to go out and listen and be the voice for their people. I witness and see it here all the time, but because we get to see the legislative side of things down here at the Alliance. But I think you just hit the nail on the head. So for those that are listening, great action item. Find out who your local legislator is, who serves in your region. Reach out to them and just tell them, hey, we need your help. Write letters, call their offices, make it a thing, and it'll be heard, and they'll go out, they'll go get the word spread and try to get to work on getting it done. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us today. As always, you're just you're a saint. You're just fantastic to have out. You're always a professional. I'm really excited about the fact that we matched outfits today. I don't know how.
I am too, Jason. I mean, this is just ESP, I guess.
Yeah, ESP. So for our audience again, Miss Margaret Kidd, she's done a phenomenal job. We wanted to get this out to you. I highly encourage. There's some encouragement here. Really, some things to pay attention to. We have a couple of different things. When people hear the strike, know the whole thing's not shut down. It sounds like it's just the container side of the business. That's a relevant point. The world's not ending. We're still going to have the refineries open tomorrow. Should this thing escalate past a couple of weeks, it could get a little dicey. It sounds like there's been some cushion baked in. People were planning for it, so that's enthusiastic, something that we can kind of rest easy on. And then it sounds like there's some ways that you, as a listener here, can get involved. Should you want to make a difference, reach out to your local legislator and see how they can step up their voice for you out in Washington should this thing continue to heat up, and get them involved as well. So we want to thank you as always for tuning in to the Gulf Coast Growth Show. We again are an extension of the Economic Alliance, whose mission is to make sure that those that are listening, just like they are today, know how their government's working with them, know how folks like Margaret are out there bringing value to the community, and how we collaborate and work together here in the Port Region to bring great value to the stakeholders and the people that live in this fine area, right? Houston and the Port Region. So thank you again for tuning in to this emergency episode, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week.